Are we live? Hi, Facebook live stream viewers. We are so happy to have you here with us today backstage at Change It Up Radio with Paula Shaw. We have a show that's going to be amazing today. I'm calling it, Do Your Genes Run the Show, or Can You Say No? We are going to have as our guest today Dr. Kulvinder Kaur, who is the Chief Scientific Officer for Epigenetics RX. She is an amazing being. We'll be telling you a whole lot more about her later, but she's going to be shocking us and enlightening us with how much of our behavior, our thinking, and the way we respond to life, how much of that is actually dictated by our genes. Yes, by our genes. We don't just inherit our eye color and all of that from our parents and our ancestors. We inherit their responses to life. So, Facebook live stream people, stick around, please. And you may have to go through that entire intro one more time because I sort of blanked on the fact that we weren't recording yet. So we'll be ready to start in just a moment. Okay, we're rolling. Here we go. Welcome to Change It Up Radio with Paula Shaw. I'm so happy to have you here with me today because I have a very, very special show for you. I'm calling that show, Do Your Genes Run the Show, or Can You Say No? My guest today is Dr. Kulvinder Kaur, who came to the U.S. originally as an alien of extraordinary ability. Yes, that was actually the title under which she was brought here from Oxford University in England to work in the field of genetic research. And she has some amazing things to talk to us about today. She'll be both shocking us and enlightening us with the information about how much of our behavior and our thinking and the way we respond in life, how much of that is actually a product of our genetics. Yeah. It's not just how you grew up. It's not just what you saw mom and dad role modeling. It's actually how your grandmother and your great-grandmother, and even before her, how those people were responding to life. We actually inherit that too, which is really interesting, isn't it? Because those people who believe in past lives already believed that what happened before impacted us, but now we know scientifically that those that came before us actually impact the way we experience life. Your great-great-great-great-grandfather could be influencing how you respond when you see a crying child, or how you feel when you're angry about being cut off on the freeway, or a million other things. So we're going to learn some fascinating stuff today a little later in the show when Dr. Kulvinder Kaur joins us. So please stay around for that. You don't want to miss this information. It will change your life. Okay, so I am delighted again to have you here with us this week on Change It Up Radio. For any of you who are new, we are all about helping people deal with change in a more positive, smooth, productive way, because change is probably the only constant in life. No matter what you're experiencing right now, you can expect that it's going to change, because it will. And so our job here at Change It Up Radio is to bring you information to help make those changes smoother, make them something that you can go through in your life with a lot more ease and grace. We also are all about spotlighting some of the big game changers out there in the world who are changing it up to make the world a better place. And one of those people is our guest today, Dr. Kulvinder Kaur. So I am delighted to have you here. Most of you know I'm Paula Shaw. I'm an author, I'm a speaker, and I'm a life transitions coach. So my work is all about helping people who are dealing with change. When people come to my office to do a therapy session, they are usually there because there's been a death or a divorce or a health diagnosis, or they've just moved to the area and they weren't expecting to feel so lonely or expecting it to be so difficult to make friends. The people that I'm working with are open usually to not just doing talk therapy, but also using mind-body tools and the tools of energy psychology and neuroscience, because I love what we have available to us today. The technology, the tools, the processes are so wonderful, and we can make change much more rapidly now than we ever could before by using these mind-body tools. So if you would like to learn more about how that works, or how to do a session with me, or find out more about my work, there is lots of information on paulashaw.com. That's paulashaw.com. And if you'd like to listen to past episodes of our show, Change It Up Radio, or if you'd like to get information about becoming a sponsor on this show or a guest on this show, all of that is available on our radio website, changeitupradio.com. That's changeitupradio.com. Now, one of the things that I have done in the last 6 months that I'm most excited about is the launching of this book, excuse me, Saying the Right Thing When You Don't Know What to Say. And I'm telling you, this book is available on Amazon, but I am getting such wonderful feedback from people and wonderful reviews because it is doing exactly what I hoped it would do. I wrote it because I wanted to help you all to treat each other better when you have to have a difficult conversation, or to be there for each other more when one or the other of you is hurting or in need. I wanted to give information to people who are having sticky situations in their workplace and don't quite know how to handle those conversations. And so I created a small book, one that you could feel you really could sit down and read in one sitting, and a book that would give you the information in a succinct, direct, precise way. And I'm feeling very excited about this book and the way it's being received. And at the urging of many people who wanted to learn more, who wanted to understand on a deeper level, whether it was professionally or just to improve their own lives, they wanted to know more about the 5 steps of successful conversations. They wanted to know more about why do we avoid those difficult conversations? Why do we find it so hard to talk about the deep stuff, the feeling stuff, the confusion and the fear and the anxiety that we all go through? But for some people, it's almost impossible to speak about their own feelings, and even harder to try to be there for somebody who is going through a difficult situation and needs to talk about it. We tend to avoid them like the plague. And there's a million good reasons and good excuses that come up in our lives that keep us from showing up. But because people asked for more help in this area, I have developed an online course called Saying the Right Thing When You Don't Know What to Say. It's a 5-week course, and right now we've just had week 2, and I'd like to share with you a little bit about that course because we'll be starting a new segment of that in February. So in week 1, we talked about the problem beneath the problem. What are the areas of our lives where we get impacted in such a way that we form ideas and opinions about how we are supposed to behave and how others are supposed to behave. Things like peer influences, family experiences, family values, social norms, all these different things impact what we believe is the right way and the wrong way to handle different situations. So one of the biggest problems we all have when we're trying to sit down and help somebody in need is it's hard not to go to a place of judgment. Because if they aren't acting the way we think people are supposed to act, if they're not doing what we think people are supposed to do in certain circumstances, it's very hard not to judge that. And when we are in a place of judgment, we are not creating emotional safety for the person who's hurting. And if we don't create that safety, they don't feel safe to speak up. And the whole idea of a helpful healing conversation is really to get the person in pain to be able to talk and process through the feelings. So this first week, we really are dealing with some very, very important things. And then in the second week, we're dealing with what is it about hurting people that scares us? What is it that about their fragility that worries us and makes us fear that we'll say or do the wrong thing? What is it? So we looked at that in last night. Next week, in week 3, we're going to get to the 5 steps of successful, supportive communication. This is a critical piece when you're going to have one of those difficult conversations. And then the week after that, we'll be looking at some of the actual things that are really helpful to say. We'll take a really good look at what's not helpful to say. And we'll also be looking at what if you're the person who's hurting and people are saying things to you that feel like judgment or feel like just they're inane or trite or they're even angering you. What do you do if you're in that place? So we're going to cover the whole gamut, and then in week 5, we're going to review, we're going to practice, and we're going to deal with individual scenarios. So I'm feeling like it's a very complete course. I'm excited about it. The people in it are loving it so far. So if you're interested in learning more about that course, contact me at paulashaw.com or paula@changeitupradio.com. All right. We need to go to break now. And in our next segment, we'll be answering some emails from people who have questions about saying the right thing when you don't know what to say. We'll be right back. Facebook live stream. I just realized that I need to be able to hear my sound engineer, and I have to put my earplugs in, so I'll be right back. It
This
just
is
seems
Todd,
that no
the
matter
engineer.
how I try,
Just take this time
to
out
wrap
to let
these up
all the
each
ladies
week.
know I am single and available.
they find a
with
way to
Valentine's
get tangled.
Day right around the corner. I like long walks.
So this is why I warned
craft
you ahead of
beer,
time. You're backstage.
and hanging out with my
You're seeing all the
family.
stuff that really goes on in the process of recording a radio show. So somewhere in another room in the studio, my sound engineer, Todd, is patiently waiting for me to unwind these headphones so that he can communicate with me and we can do the next segment. Here we go. He's there. All right. Todd, are you there?
Yes, I am.
Okay, I'm here now too, and I can hear you. So let me hit this button and we will get back. I'm going to grab a drink of water. Welcome back to Change It Up Radio with Paula Shaw. We are glad to have you with us here in this second segment of our show. And please stay around because Dr. Kulvinder Kaur, a genetic researcher who has some amazing information for us, will be with me in our next segment. And right now, we're going to be answering some emails that we've received on saying the right thing when you don't know what to say. Todd, are you there?
Yes, I am, Paula, and today we have 2 emails.
Okay.
The first one reads, I'm a director for a large company, and I have a sales force of over 100 people. One of the things I'm finding the most difficult is having conversations with employees who aren't performing well. They often don't respond in ways I think are appropriate, and they don't say the things I expect them to say. What is going on, and how can I improve this? That's from Jonathan.
Okay, Jonathan. Wow, that's a perfect email because in the last segment, I was just talking a little bit about the different things that influence us in life about how we feel, how we think, and how we respond. One of those things we're going to be learning in a little bit is our epigenetics, which Dr. Kaur will be talking to us about. But there are many other things that influence how we behave and how we think. And one of the things we all have to remember is that those people we're speaking to didn't grow up exactly the same way we did. They didn't have the same raising. They didn't have the family with the same values that we did. They may have grown up in a different part of the country where the societal norms and the cultural norms were way different from the ones we grew up with. So what happens is whatever we are taught as we're growing up, whatever we're taught is the right way to do something or the polite way to do something. Whatever we're taught is what we believe is right. And so the difficulty that this creates is that whatever we believe is right is what we think people should do. So, Jonathan, one of the things that's happening for you right now is they're not doing what you think they should do. And so it's difficult to feel comfortable with their responses. It's difficult to feel like what they're doing is correct or is what they should be doing. And this is a really tricky thing, people. In any conversation you're having with anyone out there, remember, they didn't come from the family you came from and the town you came from. Even if they did, there are differences in how it was done. And so our expectations of how other people should respond, that can sometimes become a barrier to having an open, productive conversation. So what we really have to do is make an effort to step back from judgment, step back from feeling that you know the right way that it should be. You know the right way that one should speak. You know the right way that one should think. Because everybody didn't grow up in our house, in our town, with our parents and our grandparents. And all of those factors, and many, many more, their own life experiences are going to influence how they speak and how they think. Perhaps the religious beliefs that they hold are going to influence how they think and speak. So we all need to realize that everybody is not necessarily going to do it our way, even though we believe our way is the correct way. All right. Okay, Todd, do we have another email? I hope that helps, Jonathan.
Yes, we do have another email. This one reads, my husband is going through a lot of anxiety, and while my heart breaks for him, quite honestly, it's very hard on me. He's always negatively focused, and it almost feels like he's looking for things to worry about. No matter how I try to logically point out to him that his worry makes no logical sense, he doesn't seem to hear me. It's really driving me crazy. What do I do? How can I get through to him? And that's from Lorraine.
All right, Lorraine, this is a very, very real situation that you bring up. And, many people out there are going through something similar, whether it's a parent who's dealing with dementia or Alzheimer's, or whether it's a child who is dealing with a difficult period in life, or dealing with autism or something that takes them out of the what we consider a normal spectrum of responding. So, what I would encourage you to do is realize that your husband, whether this anxiety is caused by an imbalance in neurochemicals, which is something we explored in a show not too long ago with Dr. Eliza Cicerone, those neurochemicals can change your life drastically if they get too low or they're too high. So whether it's a matter of neurochemistry or it's an emotional situation, it could even be an unfounded fear, but to the person who's experiencing that, to the person who lives in that brain, this experience is very real. I know one of my clients was telling me recently her mother, who's dealing with dementia, is going through this huge phobia right now that her caregivers are stealing her things. And while this is not happening and all of her things are where they should be, to her it's very real. And the fear is very real. So, Lorraine, please understand that your husband isn't waking up in the morning and going, wow, I feel great. I think I'll find something to worry about. That's not happening. What's happening is more like he's trapped inside this brain that perhaps has an overactive amygdala. Remember, the amygdala is that part of the brain that's always like a scanning device, always going, am I safe? Am I safe? Am I safe? And his amygdala seems to be finding many reasons not to feel safe. And so it's responding in a very real way, preparing him for fight, flight, or freeze. And so one of the things I have suggested to clients in similar situations to yours, first of all, understand as much as you can about the etiology, the origin of this anxiety. Understand as much as you can about how the brain works. And then try to reframe in your own mind seeing your husband as a child. Because this is a childlike behavior when one is afraid. And most of us, when we're in the presence of a frightened child, we would not get irritated. We would not be angry with them. We would do what we could to try to understand, to try to soothe them, and to try to help them feel better. And that's really the best thing you can do for your husband, even if the things he's worrying about have no basis in reality. Often that's exactly the case. They don't have any basis in reality. And that's when we really have to step up, take a deep breath, and try to put ourselves in their shoes and realize that these fears are very real to them. They're really afraid. So if you can try to remind yourself to think about, how would I feel if this was a frightened child? How would I feel if I were taking care of a child who was having these fears and not knowing what to do? Would I be irritated? Or would I take a deep breath and come from a loving place, come from the part of me that nurtures, and try to soothe, try to listen, try to help that other person process? So maybe use words like, tell me what you're experiencing. What does that feel like? How can I help you feel better? What do you feel like you really need right now so that you won't be so frightened? Can I give you a hug? How about if we just sit together and hold hands and let's just try to see if we can make you feel better? Or you could say, would it help if we said a little prayer together so that you feel better about things? Whatever you feel would help soothe that person and bring them to a calmer, more grounded place. That's what you want to do. That's what you want to be coming from. And by the way, I also want to say, none of us are saints, as far as I know, here on planet Earth. So of course you're feeling like he's driving you nuts. Of course you get to a place of being irritated and feeling like you can't take it one more minute. That's totally normal. So give yourself some breaks. Get away from that scenario. Go have fun with friends. Do things to nurture yourself because you matter in this deal too. So I'm not just saying rise to sainthood and be there for this person who's hurting, because he is. But I'm also saying, remember that your number one job, the number one job for all of us, is to take good care of ourselves. Because if we don't, if our wells dry up, it doesn't matter who lines up with their little tin cup. We have nothing to give them to drink. So remember what they say on the airplane. Put the oxygen mask over your own face before trying to help someone else. All right, we'll be right back after this break with Dr. Kulvinder Kaur. See you in a minute. Okay, Todd. Oop. All right, Facebook live stream folks. We are in the process of getting Dr. Kaur, and we will be getting into the next segment in just a moment. There she is. Come, dear one. Hello. Have a seat, please. I know. And we're going to have to do a little mic check with you. And the Facebook live stream audience is looking at you right now. And I brought this just in case we wanted to show
how fun.
the company stuff.
Cool.
All right, so let me see it. Todd, are you ready for her to do my check? Okay. So remember, even if you're looking at me, you need to talk right into that.
Got you.
So put it where? Good girl. All right, so you want to count? So you can hear her already? All right, you're good already?
You can hear me already.
Perfect.
I love that.
Now, the challenge is always that we want to make eye contact, but if we don't have this, like right there. Now,
Got
this
you.
actually would be good. If are you comfy? You want me to scoot over so you can bring your legs?
Comfortable.
You're good?
Yeah.
All right.
I've only got short little legs. It comes in handy sometimes. Not always, but sometimes.
I know. I'm kind of in that club, too. Most definitely. All right, my darling, if you're ready, let's do this thing. We set a little intention already before for the highest good of all and for bringing great information that can help people have better lives. Love it. All right. So be it. Okay. I think this will be just like having another lunch.
That's my
We're gonna
favorite.
have so much
kind
fun.
of thing.
This is, by the way, Facebook live stream listeners, is one of my dearest friends and one of the most amazing people on the planet. So this is almost going to be like you're going to have a little sneak peek at us having lunch together. All right, let me take a sip of water. All right. Put my glasses on so I can actually see your bio. All right, let's rock it. Welcome back to Change It Up Radio with Paula Shaw. Well, we've all been waiting for this moment since I've had you on the edge of your seat since the beginning of the show when I told you who my guest was going to be today. And here she is in studio with me now Dr. Kulvinder Kaur. She was a scientist at the University of Oxford for 14 years before a U.S. biotech company somehow brought her here as, get a load of this, an alien of extraordinary ability. And I don't know about the word alien, but I will tell you she has extraordinary ability. So she has been here for several years doing pioneering research in the use of disruptive technologies to enhance the healthcare industry through genetic diagnostics. We're going to be wanting to definitely learn more about that. She has a passion to work developing integrative medicine based on genetic diagnostics, which is really cool. It's like the ultimate customized, individualized medical care. Dr. Kaur's TED Talk at Winnipeg was an amazing, amazing success and was built on her vision for a society that would be built on greater compassion through an understanding of our genetically encoded subconscious responses to different environmental stimuli. Remember, I told you earlier, Dr. Kaur is going to talk to us about the fact that our thinking and our behavior and our responses to life actually are based very much on our genetics. And are we stuck with that? Are we stuck with doing it the way Grandma did it? I don't think so, but let's find out. Welcome, Dr. Kaur. I am thrilled that you're here.
Thank you so much for having me, Paula Shaw.
Oh, my
I'm
goodness.
delighted to be here.
Oh, good. And always my pleasure to have you in studio with me. So, Dr. Kaur, we know that everybody is pretty aware of the fact that our eye color, our hair, whether it's curly or straight, the color and all of that is a result of genetics. But I don't think a lot of us are really aware of the fact that how we behave, how we would respond to a crying child or to someone cutting us off on the freeway or taking our parking space, how we respond, that also has to do with our genetics, correct?
You're right, Paula Shaw. It's actually a very new area of science, though, so it's perfectly reasonable that we wouldn't be that familiar with it. In fact, my own education informed me that I inherited my genes from my mom and my dad, and that gave me my physical traits, and that was my lot in life.
Yes.
And so it's been quite the journey understanding actually that my genetics really respond to my environment. And in fact, it's this beautiful co-creation, you could say, in a sense of how our environment and our genetics can really work together to really bring us to a space of fullness and wholeness.
And I think that most people feel like, you know, your genes are your genes.
Mhm.
You got them when the egg and the sperm came together, and you can't change them. But that's not necessarily true with epigenetics, is it?
No, and you're right, that's what we're taught at school, but with epigenetics is really the science of how our cells and our genes respond to our environment. And by environment, I mean, you see how we might traditionally think of the environment, everything that's around us in the atmosphere, but also the environment of the foods that we put into our body or the company that we keep or the stresses that we're under. And it's a constant dance. We're constantly shifting and changing in response to all of the environments that we put ourselves in or that we find ourselves in sometimes.
And that actually is good news on many fronts. If I might share a little bit about how you and I came together initially, your story is pretty miraculous. In our first interaction together, Dr. Kaur came to see how I do the work I do. And you told me in that first session that you had such a difficult time speaking up, like expressing your thoughts, your feelings. Here you were, this incredible genius brought here from England, and yet even in team meetings, you were having some difficulty speaking up, right?
Absolutely, yeah. So one of the ways that I've really come to reconcile that in a language that I can relate to is that my insides and my outsides were completely incongruent. They didn't match. So yes, you're right. On the outside, I was this Oxford academic. I had all of the trappings of a great lifestyle. I had multiple letters after my name. But actually, on the inside, my cells weren't really relating that. My cells felt inadequate and unworthy. And we know that epigenetics is also the science of our ancestry. It's the inheritance of traits and experiences that our grandparents and our great-great-grandparents might have had. And so in my particular case, my insides or my cells were expressing the story of my ancestral lineage, which was that of the untouchable caste of Indian society, a part of Indian society that's very much outside of social classification. They're considered so under like so inadequate, and so my insides were just disconnected from my outsides. My environment wasn't reflecting my cellular truth.
I love the way you put that. And for any of our listeners who don't know about Indian society, the caste system is sort of like levels
Exactly.
of people, right? And so there are like the Brahmins, who they say are the scientists and the teachers and all that. The untouchables, though, they're the bottom of the rung, right? The bottom of the ladder. And you came from people who were considered in that system untouchables.
Yeah, it's a huge irony actually, because my
Yes.
outside was the outside was a Brahmin on the
Yes,
outside and an
exactly.
untouchable on the inside. So it was that huge polarity, really both ends of the spectrum. And yet it was the insides, the years and years of ancestral and genetic programming that were really expressing in my life.
Exactly. And so what we did earlier in the show, I was telling the audience about these mind-body processes that I find so wonderful today, the neuroscience processes and the energy psychology processes that bypass this little 5% conscious thinking and work more on the energetic and subconscious, and now we know genetic levels. So we took you through some processes to clear some of that ancestral thinking, right? And those
Absolutely.
limiting beliefs. And the result, my friends, is that this woman not only within months of that session started speaking at schools, then she was speaking every week at the team meetings, then she started speaking to other groups of professionals, and as I mentioned in her bio, did a TED Talk that was huge and really well received last year. So some people would call that miraculous. But what you would say was the work that we did, and much work you did after that, because you went through yoga teacher school, which is profound in itself, and a lot of other personal work. You changed your genetics to go from this person stuck in the untouchable caste mentality to somebody who's basically a Brahmin mentality now, right?
Yeah,
Did
I
I
guess
say
so.
that correctly?
Absolutely, yeah, that's right. My insides and my outsides became much more aligned, and so the novel thing about what we're saying is, I mean, this is standard. I mean, it's work that you've been doing for many years, and what's different now is that there's a scientific language that we can use to really speak to some of the changes that I experienced, which I live in my everyday life. I feel different to the girl that you met many years ago. Well, actually, only 4 years ago, would you believe?
Wow. Yeah, you have changed a lot. And you came here with a great job. Excuse me. But now, one of the things I did not tell the audience yet is that you are today the Chief Scientific Officer for Epigenetics RX, which is a fabulous epigenetics research company here in San Diego County, right?
Yeah, it's one of the greatest honors of my life, actually, because this is a company that really is very much at the cutting edge of everything that we've spoken about, of really offering high quality, good data to really start to leverage some of this information that we're talking about, some of these genetic signatures, to really improve human performance and to support people in living their greatest life. So they offer some really, really useful and some, what's the word I'm looking for, actionable. So there's much, as you kind of mentioned earlier in the show, some of the information that we get from our genetics is is interesting. It gives us our eye color or whether our hair's straight or curly, but to really be able to leverage this information to improve the human condition is something that I've been passionate about for years, and this feels like a really wonderful opportunity and a really wonderful platform to be able to bring that forward from.
I am so delighted about the whole thing.
Me too.
Because Epigenetics RX is a company which is run by another dear friend of mine, Deb Hubers. So the fact that two beautiful beings are coming together and you're going to impact the world in a huge way, I just know it. That is exciting information. So one of the things I want to get into in our next segment, Dr. Kaur, is how does this diagnostic genetics work and what's the value to the average person? Yes, you've had this incredible change, and I think that's important to a lot of people who may feel like, oh, I'm stuck with my shyness, or I'll always be withdrawn, or I'll always need attention, or whatever. But there's more to it, isn't there?
Absolutely. What I would have dearly loved more than anything, just for my own curiosity, actually, I mean, I feel the changes that is to have had a genetic sample taken from myself right at the beginning of my journey and to see where it is now.
Hold that right there, and we'll get into that when we come back from the break.
Wonderful. Thank you.
We'll be right back.
I love it.
Yeah, is there any areas that you wanted me to
I thought that was so stunning, and my heart is just yes,
me too.
Happy.
All right, here we go. Welcome back to Change It Up Radio with Paula Shaw. In studio with me today is one of my favorite people in the world and one of the most brilliant people in the world, Dr. Kulvinder Kaur. And she is the new Chief Scientific Officer for Epigenetics RX. She's been talking to us about some fascinating information that actually tells us that how we respond in life, how we treat other people, how we respond in different scenarios is not just about whatever we've experienced or who raised us. It has a lot to do with our ancestors and the genetic makeup that we came into this life with. So, Dr. Kaur, you were just saying in our last segment that how you wish you could have had a genetic sample of yourself before our session and your yoga training and all the other things that have taken you from this little shy person who's now a TED Talk person. So tell us a little bit more. How does that work? What is the value to the average person of this kind of work that you're doing?
Well, actually, that's one of the reasons I'm so delighted to have joined Epigenetics RX. I really wanted to be working with a company who understood the importance of offering really high quality, good data that actually we could leverage to make a difference to a given individual. Many of us associate genetic testing with what I often refer to as recreational genetic tests. So these tests that might give you insight into your ancestry and insight into your physical characteristics. And while I love playing with those, there's a real difference between that kind of information and the kind of information that we want to offer that will really allow us to start to answer some of these bigger questions of how is it I can use the information as to how my genes are expressing to really understand how I might be able to live a better life, what supplements might be most valuable for me, what environments are not really serving me right now, how might I shift my environments, how might I find different practitioners to really support me on my journey. And that's what I envisage, or my vision for the future of this work is, that we really want to use it to improve human performance, improve our journey through this lifetime. And there's nobody really doing that out there. The actual quality of the genetic information that we can offer and the quality of the interpretation and the quality of the actionability I mean, it's just still so cutting edge that it feels like we're really at the forefront of understanding how exactly we can use this data. And it's a multi-omics approach. It's looking at our genome, our epigenome, our microbiome, our proteome, all of these different words, which is fascinating in and of itself. But how we can use the ohms to take us home.
Ooh, I love that. How we can use the ohms to take us home. Let's get this really grounded in what everyday people can relate to. Let's say I am a person who feels anxious all the time, and I'm not even really sure why. And I come to you or to Epigenetics RX, and I say, I don't know why I'm like this. What can you do for me? How would this actually play out?
Well, we would actually be able to offer a genetic test which would give us insight into your metabolome and into some of the genomic pathways that you're expressing right now. And that might, for example, demonstrate particular genetic variations that might mean you're not processing a given molecule in your system in the way that you might that might be most beneficial to you. So that would be the baseline, but that really is a baseline. We're really wanting to take that information and see how far we can really take it. What genes are switched on and what genes are switched off in your body at a given moment? How can we use that information to really start to think about your past? And it's really it's an amalgamation of multiple data points to really come to a big picture of everything that you're experiencing and make it fully personalized to your experience, to your story, to your grandparents' story, potentially, to everything that's ever happened to you, and see how we can bring that into a place of greater alignment. You shared with me a beautiful story once, which I think illustrates this really well, about somebody who was working with you who had an ancestral lineage that was contributing to their deep anxiety that they hadn't ever, and that is probably one of the most powerful demonstrations I've ever experienced.
And what I'm and yes, in this case, this woman had Jewish ancestry. She had never herself lived through the Holocaust. She had never been in a camp or any of that. And her life in present day was beautiful. Loving husband, great home, great work. But she would go into these like paralyzed, depressive states, and she didn't understand it. So it's true. It's very much like somebody not understanding their anxiety, like we were just discussing.
And there are some strong publications now, peer-reviewed scientific publications, demonstrating that descendants of the Holocaust have a very different expression of a gene. I remember correctly, it's called FKBP5, but it's a gene that is differentially expressed based on that ancestral trauma.
Wow. So what they experienced changed their genetics, and then they passed that on to their children, right?
Right.
So let me ask you a question. Like in the case of what we did with you, if we'd had that genetic sample before the sessions, before the work, before the yoga training, would we see a difference in your genetics afterwards? Or did you just somehow lose the shyness and become a great speaker?
That's the premise, actually. At least, and from what I've seen and from what I've experienced, that's exactly right. You would see differences in gene expression over the course of my healing and my journey. And that's the kind of information we would love to use to really be able to support other people's healing and other people's journeys. It's the greatest evidence I personally need is how different I feel, but it's so validating, and it's a different language to express how much healing I've gone through when we can actually see it expressed in our genes and on a piece of paper, actual quantifiable empirical evidence showing different gene expression of genes that might have been under or overexpressed based on my ancestral lineage being told to be quiet and not be seen, and that they were unworthy and outside of society.
Wow. So would it be, I don't mean blueprint, but let's say, would we find that a certain expression would always show up, a certain gene expression would show up with people who experienced like the Holocaust survivors or that sort of thing. So it's kind of across the board. We're going to see that most likely in people who are experiencing those symptoms.
Some of the data that I've read definitely demonstrates that there are particular gene expression patterns that are associated with particular trauma patterns.
Right.
Yeah, there's a very powerful paper from the Netherlands that shows gene expression patterns associated with prenatal or gestational starvation. They're associated with higher BMI in the descendants, like 2 generations down of those grandparents.
Now, this is reminding me of the study that you talked about when I first heard you speak. And I think it would be great to share with our listeners about the mouse that they put through that scientific experiment with the fragrance and the shock.
Yeah, it's a wonderful demonstration, actually, of how you can really help to use science to really interact with the social scientists. So it was an experiment conducted by scientists from Emory University in Atlanta, mouse, and sensitized it to a given molecule, acetophenone. It's a cherry almond-like smell. So every time they would expose this mouse to this scent, they would give the mouse also a small electric shock. And over time, this mouse comes to understand that this scent is associated with pain and only needs to be exposed to the scent to go into this shock response, even if they don't actually give it an electric shock. And we're pretty familiar that Pavlov was the first scientist ever. Pavlov's dogs, he'd ring the bell and the dogs would salivate. But what they did that was really remarkable was to breed from that original mouse. And they found that the descendants of that mouse were also petrified of this scent, even in the absence of any reason to be.
They'd never been shocked.
No, exactly.
But they responded as though they had.
Yeah.
That's huge. And I think that really helps people in a very vivid way to understand what we're talking about here. So our lives are determined by so many things. And what I'm finding in the work I'm doing is that, and I now need to clear people's stuff. When they come to me with negative experiences or negative behaviors or that sort of thing, I'm now clearing, first of all, from the actual trauma and life experiences that they've had. Secondly, the limiting subconscious beliefs that usually evolve from those experiences. But now I'm also clearing on the level of genetic signatures of the ancestors because of what you've taught me. And it is huge. It's so powerful in really helping people take that to the next level.
Absolutely.
So, Dr. Kaur, my only regret is that we are out of time and we have so much more to talk about. So you have to promise to come back.
I would love to, Paula.
And I would love to sit with you again, as I always do when I sit with you. And I want to thank our listeners. I hope you have found all of this as fascinating as I do, and that you will understand how useful this information can be in changing your life and changing your behavior. So, Dr. Kaur, if they want to learn more about Epigenetics RX or you, how do they find you?
Epigenetics RX has an absolutely wonderful website, actually, with a lot of resources and a lot of education around a lot of this.
Good.
So,
and is it just is it epigenetics.com? Epigeneticsrx.com?
Yes.
I believe it is. Yes, epigeneticsrx.com. Dr. Kulvinder Kaur, you have blessed my day and my show being here. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure.
And you can find us on every major podcast platform, as well as right here at KCBQ AM 1170, The Answer, and 96.1 FM, The Answer. And we look forward to having you here with us again next week. Take care. Bye-bye. And Facebook live stream viewers, thank you for being with us. And please stay tuned to this lady. Learn more about her. She is a truly amazing being. All right. See you next week.